everybody. Welcome. My name is Danielle Williams, and I am a teacher and sign painter here in Milwaukee. Thank you to Arts at Large for having me this morning. Today we're going to be talking about sign painting, which is an art form near and dear to my heart. My dad is Jeff Williams, known as the King of Paint in St. Francis, and he has been a traditional sign painter for 40 years. So I grew up in a sign shop. Growing up, a lot of people didn't know what sign painting was because it's a pretty old traditional art form. But there's definitely a renaissance now for appreciation for this type of art. And signs are really vital things in our lives. They advertise things. They let people know, what we want to sell, what we believe in. So whether you're making a sign for your business with the name of your business, or a sign to put on your window to advertise what your business is selling, or just for the average person, if you're having a yard sale or building a lemonade stand, you might want to make a sign for that. Nowadays, signs are really important right now in this time. A lot of people are out protesting, or you might be making signs for a parade. So signs are a way to tell people what you believe in, what you stand for, and what you've got going on. So I think signs are all around us. They're very important. And today we're going to talk about how to make a sign. And a lot of people don't really think about what goes into advertising or making a sign that's really stands out, is really readable. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to lay out a sign so that you can make sure that your message is very clear and can be seen from afar. We're working with paintbrushes. We're using our hands today, so these are hand-lettered signs. Again, so my father, Jeff Williams, he is an old-school sign painter. He draws out all of his signs with his hands, with a pencil. He doesn't use any computers. And you might see that there's sign shops nowadays that can use computers and use vinyl letters and use different fonts from a computer. But today we're going to be talking about how you make a really beautiful letter using your own hand, using your own lettering style or handwriting, and what makes a letter very readable and beautiful. So the first thing you want to think about with a sign is where is your sign going to be? Who's going to read it? If you're, for example, if you're making a sign for you're having a yard sale, so I'll show you a sample of what I've made here. So you're having a yard sale. Maybe you want to think, okay, where am I putting this sign, and who's reading it? So are people reading it walking by? Are they going to be driving in their car? How big do the letters have to be so that people can read them from wherever they're going to be and wherever they're going to see it? So you really want to think about that. You want to think about color too. So you'll see here I've got a graphic line in yellow, but of course yellow is it's a bright color, but it might be hard to read from far away. So it adds a nice graphic line, but the letters and the arrow I want to make in a really bold color. So I use red or blue or a darker color. You could use black, but you want to make everything pop. So thinking about where your sign is going to go and who is going to read it. I have another sample here. Something you might have if you were going to a protest or a parade, or you're hanging something in your window, some words of encouragement. We're better together. And I really think about when I have a message that I want to put on a sign, I think about how can I make that message in as few words as possible to really get the point across. because you don't want to have too many words on a sign, because that makes it really hard to read. You want it to be something that people can, again, read from afar and read quickly, because people are coming and going, especially if they're in their car. They're reading something fast. So if you can keep your sign to minimal words, that's great. You could even, after I painted this sign, I thought, wow, I could even shorten it just to put better together. But I kind of like how this sign is divided up. I've got better, that's the key word. We want to be better. So I gave that like a nice yellow drop shadow, and then I'm framing it with the words we're and together. So it kind of sandwiches everything in. And then I added this yellow squiggly graphic line at the bottom to kind of tie in the yellow that's here in the middle. So you just really want to think about color and layout. Of course, when I'm laying out a sign, I think of how many words and how could I stack them together so that they also look beautiful, right? You'll notice together is written in a smaller letter than better, because better has fewer letters, but I'm trying to kind of make it visually stacked here. So there's a lot to think about to make a sign really beautiful. I'll show you one more today, and I thought this is something we can use as our sample sign today. Of course, you're at home and you can write whatever you want on your sign, but we're gonna make an ARTS4ALL sign today, since that's the workshop that we're doing. And I think it's a beautiful message. It's not just the name of this workshop, it's a good message that we want to provide arts to people all over the place. And so again, look at these words, right? I've got a number here, but they're really, really small words, but still I want to think about, okay, I've got a 4-letter word, I've got 1 letter or number here, and then I've got 3 letters. How can sometimes I add an exclamation point just to sort of make the space even. But I'm thinking about, okay, I've got 4 letters, so I kind of want to find the center of my paper, and I want to space it so that there's 2 letters on one side and 2 letters on the other side. Of course, different letters have different widths, just depending on how much space they take up. So there's a lot to consider there as well. So I've done a lot of talking. Let's get to making a sign. So I'm going to move this out of the way. And I believe in your Arts for Large kit, you got this, those of you who picked up a bag from Arts at Large, you got a bag that looks like this. Those of you, if you're watching and you didn't get a bag, what we're going to use today is either a piece of butcher paper, or if you had a kit, I believe you got a piece of poster board. So that's what we're going to make our sign on. To start today, I thought we could just practice a few brush strokes first. So in your Arts4ALL kit, you also had a couple pieces of watercolor paper, and that we can use today just to practice and really get the hang of the paint on our brush and the strokes that we want to use to create our letters. So you have, I believe, some acrylic paint in your kit. Typically for sign painters, we use something called lettering enamel, and actually I have some enamel paint here from Elf Enamel, so that's the kind of paint that I use. There's also one-shot paint, which is a really popular paint for sign painters. So I'm going to use some lettering enamel today, but you can use your acrylic paint. And what I would recommend is I work with my paint in little cups. You can use like a little Dixie cup. I have like a little medicine cup here. Usually they're clear, but I've already had some paint in mine today. If you don't have a little cup to use, you can also, of course, could use like a yogurt container, or you could just palette on using one of your pieces of watercolor paper. That's also okay. Squeeze a little paint out there and palette it with your brush. For acrylic paint, you want to see kind of what the consistency is on your brush. If you need to thin it out, you can thin acrylic paint with a little bit of water. Just a couple drops will do. I think I tested out the acrylic paint that you have in your ARTS4ALL kit, and I think it flows pretty well as is, so you might not have to add too much water. If you're using enamel paint, of course, shake your paint up first. If you're using enamel paint, what you thin it with is either turpentine or some mineral spirits. So that's what I have here today. I put mineral spirits in a contact solution bottle. That makes it really easy to squeeze out, so just a little handy tip. The mineral spirits is definitely stinky, so it's good that you aren't here with me and can't smell this. But I just thin it out. I stir it with a palette knife. Again, if you're using acrylic, you might not have to do this today, but I'm just gonna do this. I was painting last night, so I've got some weird chunks in my paint today. Hopefully that doesn't affect what we're doing. So you want your paint to be a little bit runny, but not too runny. We're going to be working on a flat table surface today, but typically I work on an easel, and I kind of like doing that because then I make sure that the paint is just hitting the paper on the easel, and I don't run the risk of dripping all over my paper because I have a tendency to be kind of messy when I paint. So let's just work on a couple brush strokes first. You can take out in your kit you have a craft brush that looks like this. It's kind of a stiffer brush. Today I'm going to be using from home one of my lettering brushes. If you are interested in getting a sign painting brush, a lettering brush, Mac brush has a lot of really good brushes. You can also get sign painting brushes at Blick. Again, to keep my brushes really nice and soft, I oil them. So my brush right now has a little bit of oil in it, so I'm just gonna rinse mine out first. And I always keep a folded paper towel around so I can just dab off my brush with that. And usually whether I'm using water with acrylic paint or mineral spirits with enamel paint, I have one big rinsing cup and then one little rinsing cup, and it's kind of like step 1 and step 2 just to get the brush really clean. Okay, so let's work on our paint strokes. So for now, just make a couple lines using your yardstick or a ruler across your paper. It doesn't have to be super even. You can just maybe 3 or 4 inches between your 2 lines, and this is just going to be the length of your brush stroke. So again, whether you're working out of a cup or working on a palette, like on one of your pieces of watercolor or magazine paper, you're just going to palette out your brush. So when I'm working, I just work straight out of the cup. So I palette the brush on the side of the cup, and I want to make sure, again, this is kind of a chunky paint today, unfortunately, but I want to make sure I'm paletting it first so that there's paint in the bristles of the brush all the way up, but I don't want to get too much paint on the handle of the brush because that's going to create a big mess. And then I palette the brush a couple times on the edge, and so the idea is that you can kind of see there's like a chisel on the brush and that's what you're going to use to get the flow of the paint. Can we go back to this? Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So for a brush stroke, we're just going to work with casual letters today. So you're kind of going to use the tip of your brush and pull a little bit to the right. This is strange to do this way. I'm usually doing it on an easel. And then kind of flick it at the bottom and then come, stand up for this. Whoops. So just practice a couple strokes and then you can kind of see, like, is my paint really sticky? Do I need to add some water to it? Is it dragging? Do I need to get more paint on the bristles of the brush? So always practice a few strokes first, just so I can see what I'm doing. And when I hold my brush, I hold it with 3 fingers so that I can really spin it. Right now we're just doing straight brush strokes, but of course, if you're doing a rounded letter, you want to be able to get some movement in your brush. So just keep practicing all the way to the end of your line, and if you want to make another one, you can. So you can see, just play around with it. Here's one brush stroke. If I want to make a thicker line on my letter, I can do like 1.5. And the shape of one line of your letter, or one stroke of your letter, is just going to kind of be straight, but with a little flick at the top and the bottom. And you'll notice I use my pinky to kind of guide my brush along the paper. If you're working upright on an easel, sometimes what I do is hold my left hand, because I'm right-handed, I hold my left hand on the easel and I use that to steady my right hand as I'm painting. It's another trick. So again, if you want to keep working on these strokes, by all means, draw a couple more lines on your paper. Maybe, maybe make them 4-inch tall letters. You've got a pretty big brush in your kit, so you don't want to make your letters too short because they'll be really short and fat and look a little strange. So I would say 3 or 4-inch tall letters for what we're doing today will be great. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to practice today is laying out a sign. So you can let your paint rest for now. Find a spot maybe on a paper towel or something where you can let your brush rest. And I'm going to move some of the things out of the way here, and then I'm going to get out, first of all, I'm going to get out my masking tape, because we're going to want to keep our paper secure to the table or easel that we're working on. So I've got some, I like to use painter's tape actually because it's not as sticky. Masking tape is totally fine. And usually what I do when I'm working on an easel is I'll put 2 pieces at the top and then 2 pieces at the bottom. And I want to make sure, for this exercise, I want to make sure that my paper is straight. So I don't think you can see, but I've got the edge of my paper, I'm gonna put it flush with the edge of my table so that I can use my table to help me measure and draw a straight line. So arrange your paper so that it's even with the edge of your table or easel, and then secure it with 2 pieces or 4 pieces of masking tape, whatever you've got. So I'm going to do 2 at the top and then 2 at the bottom. And then I'm going to show you a little trick that I use that's really helpful with my yardstick. So you've got your yardstick, and the first thing I want to do is find out where the center of my sign is horizontally, right? Because I want all of my words, as I stack them, I want them to be in the center of my paper. So the paper that I'm using is about 22 inches tall from top to bottom. If you're using your poster board today, I think typically the poster boards are like 22, 24 by 28 inches. So mine is 22 inches tall, so I want to find the center. So I'm going to divide 22 by 2, so that's 11. So on my yardstick, I'm going to find the 11 and just make a little mark. And actually, I'm going to make mine a little farther out on the right side of my paper. I don't know if you can see that. I'll make a little bigger mark there. So here's my trick that I like to use. Now, of course, you could go to the other side and find that 11-inch mark and then lay your yardstick across to measure. But what I find much easier is I put my pencil and I let it rest at the top of my yardstick like this. So my fingers are holding on to the end of the yardstick and my pencil is resting on the edge of the top of the yardstick. And with my left hand, I'm holding the yardstick and I'm kind of sliding the top of my pointer finger along the edge of my table. So I'm going to even my pencil out with the mark I just made, and then without drawing a line, just find that flow. If you can just run your left hand pointer finger along the edge of the table, that will guide your pencil in a super straight line across your paper. So I'll show you what I mean. And now I have to tell you, this might take a couple tries. It was a long time before I really got the hang and trusted my hand to be super straight with this line. But it's a really good trick that works really well. So I've got a line down the center. So I know this is the horizontal center of my paper. And we're going to make a sign today, or at least what I'm going to show for my example is a sign that says ARTS4ALL, like the sample I showed you earlier. So I know that I want 3 lines of copy. Copy is another word for the words that you're going to use. So I want 3 lines of copy. So if this is my center line, I'm going to measure a little bit above and a little bit below to make that first block of text for the number 4. So I think I'm going to make my letters about 4 inches tall today. So I'm going to measure 2 inches above my center line and 2 inches below. And it doesn't have to be exact. You can, as my dad always says, you can eyeball it. That just means like you can look at it and see about how big you want it. Nothing has to be exact. And then so I've got my center line of copy. Now I'm going to work from the top and below. So I'm going to leave a little bit of space, so maybe about 1 inch of space. Okay, so that's the bottom of my first line of copy. And then again, remember I made this 4 inches wide. So I'm going to measure 4 inches again. And make another line. And the reason I like to lay out my signs first is just so I know that I can get my words really nice and straight, even though I've been making signs for a little while now. I still, when I'm painting, it's hard when you're up, especially on a big sign, it's hard to really see up close to see if you're painting straight. So I always like to lay this out. I'm gonna make some room for myself. Sorry for the noise. Okay, so if you can see that I have 1, 2, there's the center line, 3 lines of copy, okay? So I wanna write on my sign, I wanna write Arts for All. So again, remember when we were looking at that sample earlier, I'm gonna show you again so you can get a vision. We just laid out these 3 lines, and those are like the 3 lines of copy we have here. So remember, I'm thinking about how many letters are in the words that I'm writing, and where is the center going to be? So this is easy. Arts is just 4 letters. So if I'm visualizing this as the center of my sign, then I want kind of 2 letters over here, 2 letters over here. The 4 is going to be right in the center. And then if I have all with an exclamation point, you can leave that out if you want, but you're going to want that centered too, okay? So let's lay that out. And I always lay that out with a pencil first as well, because you'll see sometimes I write it out and then I realize, oh, it's crooked, and I need to redo it. So I always do it with a pencil. And the cool thing about pencil is once you paint over it, you can always go back with your eraser and erase all the lines afterwards. But honestly, when you're viewing a sign from afar, you don't even really see these pencil marks. You just see the bold paint. So, okay, Arts for All. I'm going to do this in casual italic letters. So when I say italic, I just mean it's going to slant a little bit, and I just want to make sure that all the letters slant in the same direction. So let's see. And I'm just doing this really lightly. Hopefully you can see, but on your paper you can do it really nice and light. Arts. Now I always try to do the top of my T first just to see how far it's going to go over, and then draw that centered line. Again, I'm going to make my letters a little slanty. If you want to do them straight up and down, that's totally fine. And for the S, when I lay out an S, I always draw a circle or an oval first, and then fit that S in the circle as a guideline. Just use that circle as a guideline. Okay, Arts, the number 4. Again, trying to keep the same slant as the letters I have up there. Now you're drawing with your pencil, which is a very thin line, but really imagine that brush stroke that you just practiced, and how big do you need to make the letters to be able to paint with that big brush. Don't make them too small, because then you won't be able to make the forms of your letters. So Arts for All. And again, remember you can make whatever you want on your sign right now, but if you want to practice with me, that's fine too. So all, and then I'm going to do that exclamation point again. I always like to make the exclamation point just a little bigger than the letters, just to really make it bold. Okay? So, okay, I did a pretty good job laying that out center, but now is the time with your pencil just to take a look at this. Do you need to move a word over? Do you need to check the shape of a word? Is your S a little strange? Do you need to even that out? And you can always, if it's helpful, you can go back and erase some things, but again, you don't really see the pencil marks once you paint, so I don't worry too much about all those crazy pencil marks. Okay, So we've got our sign laid out, and you can even step back and take a look at it and see, are those letters big enough? Are they bold enough? Do I need to make them bigger? Do I need to rearrange them? And you can start to visualize maybe where it would be cool to put a graphic line. Okay, and then next we're going to paint. So if you got an ARTS4ALL kit, you probably just got one color of paint in your kit, so you can use whatever color that is. When I'm painting paper signs especially, so on a white background, I always like to work with these bold colors. Now black, of course, you see very well, but you know, I like to add a little bit of color to it. So I like reds and blues. So I'm gonna work with a red paint today, and then if we have time, I'll add a little yellow, maybe drop shadow or graphic line just to kind of make it pop. All right, so I have that red paint from before. Now my paint has it's been sitting for a couple minutes and it's a hot day, so it might need to be thinned out a little bit. So just check the paint you're working with. Make sure it's a good consistency for your brush to flow. Again, palette that brush, make sure there's paint all in there. As my dad says, make sure the brush is loaded. Like, make sure it's got enough in there that it's going to carry you through your letter. Now with a casual letter, and again, if you want to practice this on a piece of watercolor paper first, before you start painting on your sign, feel free. For a casual letter, there's different types of letter when we sign paint. There's a block letter, right? That's almost like a thick letter that you would that's really nice and straight on the edges. And a casual letter is the stroke we were practicing, where it's just kind of like, it just flows, and you can do a casual letter super fast once you get the hang of it. So that's what we're going to work on today. And again, I'm making my letters kind of slanty. So when you're painting a casual letter, you want every stroke of the letter you want to load your brush with paint for every stroke of the letter, okay? So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to make this A and try not to bonk my head on the camera. So I'm going to do the first stroke of the A. And you can see, is that as thick as you want it? Do you want to make it 1.5 strokes? Could try that. Okay. Now I'm going to make this next stroke of the A, but I'm going to load my brush back up because I don't want to run out of paint when I'm making that stroke. So for the A, I kind of slide over the stroke that I just painted and then come down. All right. And then since we don't have too far to go for this horizontal stroke of the A, I don't necessarily have to reload my brush. There it is. We've got our A. Now I'm going to the R, so again, reloading my brush with paint, palette it out on the side, get that nice chisel on it. Using my hand again to help guide my right hand. I always hold my paint in my hand, but you can set it down. You don't have to multitask. There, I'll set mine down. Make it easy on myself. This is a little bit of a new adventure for me, painting on a table instead of an easel. So always good to try something new. See how you like it. You can always come back in. Sometimes if I have a little strange shape on the bottom of my letter, I just come in and fix that. Okay, reloading my brush. Now for this R, I'll show you. For the top stroke of the R, I just come around like that first. I don't go for the full rounded part of the R just yet. I reload my brush. And then I kind of retrace my steps a little bit and then curve down. Now I reload again. I'm going to have that little foot that kicks out of the R. I'm going to start where this one hit the vertical stroke and bring it out and kind of flip it up a little bit. Okay, now for the T. Remember what I said when we were laying out the T? I always like to do the top horizontal stroke of the T first, because then I know how wide I want the T, and then I can come in and find the center of that T. If you make the vertical stroke first and then you realize, oh, I don't really have enough room for my horizontal stroke, then you've got a wonky T. Nobody wants that. So here we go. We're going to make this top stroke. I kind of pull down. And out. And then you can find the center. Now I see my paint's kind of getting a little sticky, so before I attempt to do this S, I'm going to thin out my paint a little bit. So again, if you're using acrylic, maybe add a couple drops of water if you need it. Oops. And I'm dripping on my paper. That's okay. Okay, so for this S, I do, well, it kind of depends. If you're doing a block letter S, sometimes I like to do the top and the bottom stroke so I know where I'm coming in with that curve. For a casual S, I'm just gonna go for it. S's are really tricky letters. Every sign painter will tell you that, you know. So take it easy on yourself. If your S looks a little crazy, don't worry, you're in good company. We all have crazy S's. So I do that kind of middle stroke, and then I'm gonna retrace my steps a little bit, come around, even that stroke out. And now for the bottom stroke, get that chisel on my brush. I'm going to start from over here and hold my brush vertically and then pull it down and connect. And then see how here it looks almost like a folded ribbon? Then just retrace it. Make sure you get that stroke all evened out. And there you go. Arts. All right, so I'm just gonna power through the rest of these letters. Again, take it easy on yourself, you know, to get really nice even letters takes a lot of practice. Even me, you can see, I'm still practicing. It's still some signs turn out great and some signs you think, oh, well, there's lots that I can improve for next time. So for my number 4, I always like to start with the vertical stroke, and then kind of like we did with the A, where we retraced and then pulled down. That's what I do, but kind of the other direction for my 4, personally. Okay. Remember to reload your brush for every stroke that you make. And as you paint these letters, really look at the distance between each letter. You know, of course, every letter is shaped differently. I'm looking up here at Arts. I could have even moved this S over a little bit because there's a lot of negative space under the top of the T. So, you know, you just kind of have to see how your letters work together. And that's something that you learn as you go. And my favorite thing to do is, you know, once you start painting signs, it really helps you to notice the signs around you in the world. And I love to look at signs old and new, and look at all the different letter styles and typography, and to notice if signs are painted by hand or if they're done on a computer. And how that changes the sign, and what makes a sign eye-catching to me. What colors make it eye-catching? What kind of letter styles make it eye-catching? And the nice thing about these casual letters is, you know, they don't have to be perfect. You can make the stroke a little streaky if you want. So when I make a circle, I just kind of use the tip of my brush. Famous last words as I mess up that circle. Now, if you want to add some pop to your sign, you can always add in another color. So you can add some color by making a drop shadow on the letters. You can add some color by adding what we call a graphic line, so a line that sort of brings your eye to a certain word. So I always like with red, I like to use blue or yellow. So I'm going to use some yellow. So of course I'm going to rinse out my brush first. So if you're using acrylic, you can rinse out with a cup of water. For me, I'm again using this enamel paint, so I'm going to use a jar of mineral spirits that I have here. I like to use pickle jars or things like that I can put a lid on because the mineral spirits smell so strong. And then again, do your, rinse once, and if you want, you can have a fresh cup and rinse again just to get get all that excess paint out, and then I always dab it on a paper towel. Always work with the bristles of your brush instead of against it. You don't want to give your brush a bad hair day. We got to take care of our paint brushes. I'll do one more rinse on mine since I'm going to stick my brush in yellow paint. Now I just want to make sure that brush is nice and clean. Alright, and then again, I'm using e.l.f. enamel. This is their Danny D's yellow. Put a little squirt in a cup. Thin it out if you need to. I love these palette knives to stir with. And sometimes I use even a smaller brush for a graphic line. I think you've got the same size brushes, so go with what you have. I'm going to quick rinse out another brush here. All right, so I'll show you just a quick example of doing a drop shadow on a letter. What I like to do when I'm making a drop shadow is I want to give some space around my letter. So when I say a drop shadow, it's almost like something to make your letter pop out so that it looks like the sun is shining on it and it's casting a little bit of a shadow on the paper. So what I do is I leave some space from the edge of my, oh, I just stuck my finger in the wet paint. I leave some space from the edge of the letter I just painted, and I kind of imagine like the sun is coming from this direction, so there would be a shadow over on this side, and I'm leaving that little bit of white because that also adds this effect like there's a white border, and it just makes that letter pop even more. So there would be a shadow on this side, there would be a shadow on this side of the stroke, and there would be a shadow underneath. Whoops, there I go sticking my finger in the paint again. That's all right. So I'll do one more here just to show you. So that side of the R. Now don't get too close, because remember you want to leave that white edge around the A too, so if you run out of room, that's fine. Just come back there. Could be one right there. And right there. So yeah, just notice how that A and R pop compared to the T and S. Just adds a nice dimension to the sign. Goodness, what a mess I've made. Okay. Now, another thing you can add in your sign is a graphic line. So you could do a straight line using, again, sometimes I use that yardstick if I need to do a straight graphic line. But one that's really nice that you can just do freehand is just add a little squiggle line. So ARTS4ALL, we want it for everyone, all. So I'm gonna emphasize by putting a little graphic line under all. And that's a really fun thing to do. So you can just play with color, add some different, oh yeah, can you see that? Add some different dimension. I can do it up here too, so we can see that a little better. So maybe I want to add a little graphic there by the 4. It's kind of nice that I've already got that center line drawn in, so I can just follow that. Arts for all. Adds a little extra something. And of course, you can put a border on a sign, you can add some shadows, you can add some different colors. Also remember, don't get too crazy with it, because you want to add some elements that make it pop, but you also want it to be really simple enough that it's readable and it's easy to read. There's not too many words. The letters are big and bold. They've got a nice shape to them, and they get your message across. So again, when you're done, you can keep working on this. I'm gonna stop here. But when you're done, always remember to rinse out your brushes really well, so that you take good care of your brushes. I always like to, after I clean my brushes out really well, especially if I'm working with enamel paint, remember, I like to oil my brushes, and that keeps them really nice and soft. You don't have to oil your craft brushes that you got in your kit, but rinse those out and always dry them flat so that they stay in good shape. If you dry them like this, then the water or mineral spirits gets in this piece and your brushes fall apart more easily. So take good care of your brushes, take good care of your paints, close them up so that they don't dry out. And yeah, that's about it for today. If you want more information about sign painting, there's a really good documentary called Sign Painters, a documentary. My dad is actually featured in this documentary, but it covers the history of sign painting. It's a really, really interesting look at how sign painting has evolved over the years. And if you're interested in learning different kinds of lettering styles, whether you're painting or whether you're using a calligraphy brush or a pen, something called the Speedball textbook is a really good textbook out there. They're super small, and there's different kinds, and they've had them for years, but you'll see in there's all kinds of different lettering styles. There's calligraphy, there's bold, there's Gothic, there's italic, script. So it's just kind of cool to look through these and see there's so many different ways to make letters, and the way you make letters kind of evokes a different type of emotion. So it's good to see what else is out there. Again, my name is Danielle Williams. You can find my art at Danielle Lynne, L-Y-N-N-E, Williams.com. And if you want to know more about sign painting, my dad is Jeff Williams. He's thekingofpaint.com, and he also offers all kinds of sign painting workshops. So thank you again to Arts at Large for having me here today. Thank you to you for joining me, and I hope you have a beautiful Saturday morning.